I am the lowest and dumb concubine of the Jiang family. Everyone looked down on me, except Fong Huaiming, who regarded me as a treasure in his hand. He promised that after he succeeded, he would marry me and take me away from the misery of the Jiang family. I waited for him for 8 years, saved money, and made a living by sewing for him, hoping that when he had more money he would work less and spend more time studying. But on the day when my name passed the imperial examination, he looked embarrassed and said that he would have to make me his concubine. It was difficult to work in officialdom, and he needed the help of his eldest sister and mother's family to achieve success. I didn't shake my head or nod. The next day, I went to my father's study and left him a note. Qin is willing to marry the eldest son of the Wen family on behalf of her elder sister.
1.
When Fong Huaiming came to my courtyard, the moon was already high in the branches. As usual, he came in through the dog hole, leaned over the window, and called my name softly. I lifted the candlestick and limped to the window. Qin, I got it. I got it. Fong Huaiming's voice was low, but it couldn't hide the joy in his heart. In fact, I already knew it. Today, when Fong Huaiming went to see the list, his father also sent his son Xiaodian to go with him. After receiving the good news, he rushed back in a hurry. But now that I hear him say it himself, I am still happy. Qin, I finally didn't let you down. I did what I promised you. Tomorrow, I will talk to your father and choose an auspicious day to take you in. Fong Huaiming's eyes were bright and filled with smiles. But I still sensitively captured the key word, accept. A wife is taken in by marriage, and a concubine is taken in by taking in. I raised my hand hesitantly and signed. You want me to be your concubine? Fong Huaiming's smile froze, his eyes wandered, and he dared not look at me again. The political world is full of twists and turns. If I didn't have the support of the Yu family, I'm afraid it would be difficult for me to move forward. Your elder sister Jiang Xiaoxiao is favored by her father, and her mother is the cousin of the county magistrate. If I marry her, I can get help from both the political and business sides, and my career as an official will naturally be smoother. What Fong Huaiming said is the truth. To him now, I am a useless burden. Not only am I a dumb concubine's daughter, but my deceased mother was the daughter of a criminal. Marrying him would indeed be a disgrace to his status as a noble man. But where would this cold and realistic calculation put our nearly 10 years of youthful friendship? I reached out to close the window, not wanting to look at Fong Huaiming anymore. But the broken sobbing sound leaked out from the window. Qin, don't cry. I know I let you down, but only this time. After you enter my house, I will allow you to be my concubine. You don't have to follow the rules of a concubine and serve your elder sister. The freedom and peace I promised you before will still count. Fong Huaiming's promise was like a worthless item, scattered all over my yard. He talked for a long time, but I didn't respond at all. Finally, Fong Huaiming was tired and sighed. Qin, you are angry now and don't want to pay attention to me, so I will leave first. I came in a hurry tonight. Tomorrow, I will go to the river to catch your favorite mackerel and come back to make amends. Fong Huaiming is best at grilling carp. In the past, any unhappiness I had would instantly disappear after I ate his mackerel. But now I am covered with wounds, so I really shouldn't touch anything fishy.
2.
After hearing the news that Fong Huaiming passed the exam today, my father called me to the hall. My father said that Fong Huaiming has made great progress now. At the age of 17, he is a standout in the history of our dynasty and will surely become a great man in the future. He has no father or mother and has been studying in our Jiang family school since he was young. He has received the kindness of our Jiang family. Now, before he becomes completely successful, we must hold on to him tightly. When a man and a woman get married, marriage is the best way to bind him. His father wanted to marry his elder sister Jiang Xiaoxiao to him. But my elder sister had been engaged to the eldest son of the Wen family since she was young. So, someone needs to fill this vacancy. I am the only daughter of the right age in the Jiang family, so I am the only suitable candidate. The eldest son of the Wen family is 24 years old. He is the eldest grandson of the Wen family's eldest son. The Wen family and our Jiang family are old friends. We share the glory and disgrace in the business world. It is your blessing to be able to marry like this. They want the legitimate daughter of our Jiang family, so it's a good opportunity to register you under my name, which can be regarded as raising your status. The eldest lady pinched her nose and said this, with disdain written all over her face. It seems like this is a great gift to me, but I didn't know what was good for me and refused to acknowledge this marriage. I have been suffering in the Jiang family for so many years since my mother died. I finally waited for Fong Huaiming to succeed in the pregnancy and be able to take me out of this sea of suffering. I don't want to accept their arrangements. My disobedience was considered unfilial in my father's eyes. He was extremely furious and used the family rules, ordering the maid to beat me on the bench. I was beaten with 10 boards, and my lower body was covered in purple and red. Before he left, his father left behind one sentence. It is the parent's order and the matchmaker's words. If you don't obey, I will beat you 10 times a day until you agree. This didn't scare me off. Fong Huaiming was right. He is now a favorite of the Jiang family. As long as he asks to marry me, my father will not offend him, no matter how reluctant he is. I thought so in my heart. I had to encourage myself and not give in to my father's arrangements and become a traitor to this relationship. But I endured the pain in my back and waited for Fong Huaiming for a whole day. What I waited for was the news that he wanted me to be his concubine. The moment I heard this, the beating I had received, and my willingness to go against my father for him all became a joke. It turns out that no matter how deep their youthful love was, it could not defeat his career prospects. 3. I lay in bed all night without closing my eyes. When it was almost daybreak, I went to my father's study and wrote him a note. Qin is willing to marry the eldest son of the Wen family on behalf of her elder sister. If Fong Huaiming abandons me, I don't have to be faithful to him forever. The last words my mother left me before she died were, I'd rather be a farmer's wife than a concubine of a rich man. I dare not disobey my mother's last words. Since I was a child, I watched her being tortured to pieces by the eldest lady and finally died. Zhang Xiaoxiao has the same vicious and cruel personality as her mother. She has bullied me for many years since I was a child. Being a concubine under her would be a life worse than death. It would be better to marry Dalong of the Wen family. At least she is the principal wife. I don't want to repeat my mother's fate a second time. After carefully pressing the note with paperweights and placing it in a conspicuous place, I left the Jiang family and went to Sanqing Temple alone. My mother's tablet is enshrined there. I should go and tell her that I am getting married and the groom is not Fong Huaiming. When I was offering incense and burning paper money for my mother, the prayer flags fluttered slightly and someone walked into the secret room. It seems that the man you chose is ultimately unreliable. He can't even marry you, so how can he avenge your mother and overturn the verdict on your grandfather's behalf? The sound of joking came from behind me. The visitor was wearing a mask and dressed in black. I don't know his name, I only know that he is a spy killer under Prince Yong. A year ago, when I came to pay homage to my mother, Zhang Xiaoxiao hired thugs to destroy my innocence. It was he who happened to kill someone in the mountains behind Sanqing Temple and saved me. He asked me for a reward and wanted me to be a chess piece in the Jiang family to help his family achieve its goal of becoming the king of Yong. At that time he said, I know your identity, the second daughter of the Jiang family. Your mother is the daughter of a criminal official and was not a courtesan in her early years. And your maternal grandfather was the governor of Jizhou. He was beheaded for corruption 18 years ago. The case back then was very complicated and full of doubts. If you can help Prince Yong take power, there is hope that your grandfather will have his case overturned. But I rejected him. Everyone in the court knows about Prince Yong's ruthlessness, and I dare not easily be contaminated by him. Moreover, Fong Huaiming had already promised me at that time that when he became an official, he would find a way to redress the grievances of my grandfather's family. I really don't need to take any risks. Hearing this, he did not force me and let me go without hesitation, only asking me to keep my mouth shut about what happened that day. Now, he is here again. I guess that he might be looking for cooperation with me again. So, I dipped my finger in clean water and wrote on the brick, I am willing to be loyal to Prince Yong. The case of my mother and grandfather has weighed on me for many years. Since Fong Huiming is unreliable, I will rely on myself. But the spy chuckled and said, Second Miss Jiang, how can you be loyal to Prince Yong now? You will get married soon and no longer be a member of the Jiang family. How can you get information? How can you help Prince Yong and the Jiang family? I was suddenly choked. How about you pledge allegiance to me? He stepped forward, casually picked up the unburned candle, and lifted my chin. The movements are frivolous and wanton. Although I am not as powerful as Prince Yong, I can still use my power to help you. There is still hope. What do you think? I calculated in silence. My future husband, Da-Long-Wen, is the most unruly young man in the entire Yuanan County. He is good at eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling, and he is also deaf. Not only did he not have the qualifications to take the imperial examination, but he was also squeezed out of the Wen family's business at an early stage. There is really no hope. But the person in front of him, with Prince Yong as his backer, might be a way out. Thinking of this, I nodded. I haven't even told you how you're going to pledge your loyalty to me, but you've already agreed so readily? I have everything except a bed partner. The spy was wearing a mask, so his expression couldn't be seen, but his tone was frivolous. I was instantly ashamed and embarrassed for believing such a thing's teasing, so I turned around and left. Before I went out, a lazy voice stopped me in my tracks. If you don't agree, your request to me later won't count. I stood by the door for a long time. In the end, I never stepped over that threshold.
4.
The bed in the shabby Zen room was very hard, and it rubbed the wounds I had received yesterday. But this pain is no match for the tearing feeling that person felt when he attacked the city. I was moved to tears. From now on, my body, along with my life, can no longer live for myself. In the pain, I seemed to go back to the year my mother passed away. I was 8 years old that year, and my mother had been bedridden for a long time. I had no money to buy her medicine or hire a doctor, so I could only watch her getting thinner day by day. Out of the 12 hours in a day, she was unconscious for 8 or 9 hours. She always talks in her sleep. Sometimes I dreamed of the days when she was the daughter of the governor. Sometimes I dreamed of the tragic scene when her house was confiscated, and sometimes I dreamed of her being demoted to an official prostitute and living a hard life in Huajiao Tower. It was then that I learned about my mother's life experience. When she was rarely lucid, I asked her, was her grandfather framed? She always remained silent and just shed tears. On New Year's Eve of that year, when the snow fell the heaviest, the grandmother beside the eldest lady came to the courtyard and said, since my mother and I were sick and could not attend the banquet, we might as well take advantage of the good weather and pray in the snow for the Jiang family's health in the coming year. This is clearly an attempt to force my mother to death. My mother died on New Year's Eve of that year. Before leaving, she held me in her arms in the snow, trembling as she told me, Qin, you must remember what your mother said. In the future, do not become enemies with the eldest lady and your brothers and sisters. Only by keeping a low profile and being obedient can you save your life. This is all my life will be like. I just hope you can live a good life for yourself. Grow up well, marry a good family, and become the principal wife. Then you can escape from this den of tigers and wolves and live a free and peaceful life. I should have listened to my mother, but the eldest lady and her daughter went too far. After my mother passed away, I cried bitterly for her. However, Zhang Xiaoxiao thought that I was crying too loudly and disturbing the joy of the new year, so she asked my grandmother to pour a bowl of boiling medicine into my mouth. From then on, I could no longer speak. Under the double blow, I wanted to die together with that vicious mother and daughter to avenge my mother. It was Fong Huiming who stopped me. He asked me to think about what my mother said before she left. He said, your mother hopes that you grow up well, get married, and live a good life. Qin, I will lead you to a good life and marry you. I will definitely succeed and take you out of this sea of suffering. I survived because of Fong Huiming. Because of this love and the hope he gave me, I decided to listen to my mother and live a good life for myself. But Fong Huiming let me down. He let me down.
He will not marry me.
Not to mention avenging my mother and overturning the verdict for my grandfather. Every word of the love words you said back then was a lie to me. That beautiful dream was shattered. It seems that the only fulcrum left in my life is to kill my enemies. So I nodded and agreed to that man, selling my body, my future, and my life. Just a slim hope for revenge.
5.
After the spy left, I sat alone in the meditation room for a long time. The pain is long gone. In fact, except for the first time, which was extremely painful, he slowed down the movements afterwards as if out of compassion. But it still can't change. I am now a plaything of others. Gentle or rough, it's all for people's amusement. After I sorted out my thoughts, I returned to the secret room of worship in a daze. I went back to my mother's tablet, packed my things, and prepared to go back to the Jiang family. Just when I was halfway up the mountain, I saw Fong Huiming walking up the mountain. The moment he saw me, his eyes turned red, and he asked me, "I heard from your father today that you're going to marry the eldest son of the Wen family? Why?" I signed. "Marry him, and I won't have to be a concubine." Fong Huiming was like a cat whose tail was stepped on, and his tone suddenly became higher. "I told you yesterday that I had my reasons. Even if I ask you to be my concubine, you'll be my concubine. I promise you everything I can give you. Isn't that enough? Chin, don't be willful and don't make things difficult for me." Capricious? Difficult? I suddenly felt ridiculous and abnormal. Fong Huiming entered the Jiang family school 10 years ago. Being young and ignorant, he came to seek refuge with Jiang Xiaoxiao by relying on his relationship with her, but was bullied and humiliated by Jiang Xiaoxiao. Although he finally stayed in the Jiang family, he lived a hard life working and studying part-time. His mother saw him as pitiful, and even though her life was not easy, she would still help him as much as she could. When he and I were young, we were bullied by Jiang Xiaoxiao. We always supported each other and healed each other. After my mother passed away, he saw how Jiang Xiaoxiao fed me mute drugs and how she treated me even more harshly. Now, not only does he want to marry my enemy, he also wants me to be his concubine. He knew exactly what a vicious woman she was. If I don't allow it, it will be considered that I am being willful and making things difficult for him. I had ignored Fong Huiming for a long time and was shocked by his shamelessness for a moment. But he thought I agreed, so he softened his voice and said, "Come back with me. I've got the carp netted here. I'll grill it for you. Don't be angry after you eat it. Tomorrow I will go with you to find your father and ask him to agree that you and Jiang Xiaoxiao can marry me together." This is justified, and as it should be. It seems like it has to be me. I suddenly thought of the incident that just happened. So she raised her hand and said, "I am no longer a virgin. Do you still want to marry me?" Fong Huiming's hands around my shoulders stiffened for a moment. Then he removed them. "What did you say?" "Jiang Xiaoxiao hired some thugs to insult my innocence. Just now, she succeeded. I am no longer a virgin." Only then did Fong Huiming notice that my hair was messy and my clothes were dirty. He was so focused on finding fault with me that he didn't notice the slightest difference in me. The expression in his eyes changed from heartache to anger, to confusion, and finally to disgust. After a long silence, I already knew his answer. If I hadn't been rescued by the spy a year ago, I would have been abandoned by him a year earlier. This man's love is more unreliable than I thought. My sneer broke the silence. "I was just blaming you for what I said. I fell down the mountain and got my clothes dirty." After the explanation, the disgust in Fong Huiming's eyes disappeared. "You scared me, Chin. You can't joke about your daughter's innocent affairs." He smiled again and reached out to touch my head. I took a step back. My face turned cold. What I just said was a joke, but I'm not joking when I say I won't marry you. You have been so heartless and ungrateful to me before. I will never compromise and become your concubine. Our marriage is already decided. There is no turning back. Please respect yourself. I used sign language, and every movement I made was so decisive that it seemed to sever all ties between him and me. After the last word was spoken, I turned around quickly. Fong Huiming did not follow. But when I took 10 steps, I heard Fong Huaiming's voice behind me. Qin Qin, whether you like it or not, you can only be my person in this life.
6.
Jiang Xiaoxiao and I are getting married on the same day, and my father wants everything to happen in pairs. During the 3 months before her wedding, Jiang Xiaoxiao was busy preparing her wedding dowry, but I had some free time. My father only prepared the standard amount for me, not a penny more. I heard that Fong Huaiming had asked my father many times to make me his concubine. But apart from me, no one in the Jiang family can help with the Wen family's marriage. My father has not agreed yet, so I think this matter will be over soon. During this period, my communication with the spy continued uninterrupted. Every 5 days, late at night, his people would wait at the side door of the Jiang family and carry me in a small sedan chair to the largest brothel in Yuanan County, Huajialu. Having fun with him there. However, no matter how intimate they were, he never took off his mask. There are many different things to do in a place like the Flower Corner Tower. When he gets in the mood, he wants to try many different things with me in one night. I served with all my heart and cooperated with him to the fullest, and as he wished, I used my body to get the truth about my grandfather's corruption case. He was indeed wronged, and was framed for corruption. The Jiang and Wen families were close friends for a century. The Jiang family built ships, and the Wen family ran darts, monopolizing the entire Qi dynasty's water transportation. Even the government's grain transport had to use the Jiang family's ships and borrow the Wen family's darts for escort. The Jiang and Wen families were royal merchants with industrial assets. With such a vast water transport system, corruption was as easy as taking candy from a baby. Anyone who travels by water must take the Jiang family's boat, otherwise the pirates will burn, kill, and rob. All transportation of goods and grain had to be escorted by the Wen Family Escort Bureau, and adding 2 + 1 = 5 was the custom. They charged high shipping fees, deducted money and goods from the people, and exploited them at every level. Of the silver and treasures received, the Jiang and Wen families kept 20% for themselves. The remaining 30% was kept by the prefectures and counties along the way, and the remaining 50% was presented to the royal noble, the prince. 18 years ago, my grandfather was transferred to Jizhou. As a new official, he was determined to rectify this unhealthy trend. However, he violated the interests of the government and the prince, and was beheaded. After hearing the truth, I was silent for a long time. A sigh came from above my head. It was the spy's dissatisfied voice. If I had known you would be distracted, I should have finished the work before talking to you. I begged him to tell me these secret stories, and he did it while he was doing it. But after hearing this, I no longer had the energy to neglect the spy. So she blushed and pecked his Adam's apple lightly, meaning to ask him to favor her again. But the spy ignored him and got out of bed after finishing the conversation hastily. You will be leaving the palace soon. Go find Mama Lu today and restore your virginity. As early as when we were at Sanqing Temple, he told me that he controlled many industries in Yuanan County for Prince Yong, including Huajiao Tower. There are many kinds of secret techniques in Qin and Chu mansions like Huajialu, and there is no way to restore a deflowered woman back to her young appearance in order to sell her for a high price. Even though he asked me to be his bed partner, it would not delay my marriage. I am a little confused. There is still less than half a month before I get married, so there is really no need to be so anxious. He did not explain, but just put the veil on me and took me to Mama Lu's room.
7.
2 days after I restored my virginity, my father summoned me to the hall and gave me a beating. You are such a shameless person. You have brought disgrace upon the entire Jiang family. Why are you going to Sanqing Temple instead of staying at home and getting married? It's being rumored that you were beaten up by some hooligans at Sanqing Temple. It was spread so thoroughly that it even reached the Wen family. It was not until I saw Fong Huaiming behind my father that I understood the whole story. So he said that I can only be his. Is he trying to destroy my innocence? In this case, not only will I not be able to marry into the Wen family, but no other family will want me either. He can then legitimately take me as his concubine and also gain a favor for my father. Be shameless. I stared at Fong Huaiming with eyes that seemed to be quenched. I cried for him when he just abandoned our relationship. I thought that at most he was cold-hearted and unfaithful. But now it seems that he is a villain who will do anything to achieve his goals. Despite my glare at him, Fong Huiming smiled and raised his eyebrows at me, his face full of determination. I feel sick if I look at it for any longer. He knew that such words would ruin my life, but he still spread the rumors for his own selfish desires. At this moment, Fong Huiming, the person I once truly loved, completely rotted into a pool of smelly flesh and blood in front of me. My father doesn't understand the grudge between Fong Huiming and me. He directly asked my grandmother to examine my body. As long as I am still a virgin, he can swallow his pride and go to the Wen family to plead for me, and I think this marriage can still be successful. After I entered the secret room and was undressed and examined by 3 aunts, I finally understood why the spy had asked Aunt Lu to restore my virginity a few days ago. He was well informed and must have heard the news as soon as it was spread. Fortunately, we were prepared early. These aunties were sent by the Wen family, so we didn't let anything slip in front of them. My father followed them to the Wen family, and when he came back, his expression had eased a lot. Fortunately, the eldest son of the Wen family is not a pedantic scholar. As long as you are still a virgin, he will not mind that you have lost your reputation and will still let you marry him and become his legal wife. Hearing this, I bowed to my father, then turned and left. But as soon as I entered the courtyard, Fong Huiming appeared from nowhere. He hugged me tightly from behind and said in a frantic tone, "There is no man in the world who doesn't care about his reputation. If the rumors are not credible, then I will take your virginity. I don't believe he won't mind. Qin, I have protected you for so many years and given so much for you. You can only be mine. I raised the flowers, so there is no reason for me to let others pick them." As he said this, he began to tear my clothes. I never expected Fong Huiming to be so crazy. I couldn't speak, couldn't call for help. But fortunately, in preparation for the wedding, I have a lot of dowry porcelain and cosmetics in my house. I struggled and smashed the largest vase. The crisp and loud explosion made Fong Huiming panic for a moment. I took the opportunity to pick up the broken pieces and hit him hard on the arm. He let go in pain. Only then did I escape from his shackles. The Jiang and Wen families have been friends for centuries. If you were to break my body at this juncture, it would be a disgrace to my father and ruin the marriage between Jiang and Wen. You are just a small official now, and you haven't been given an official title yet. Can you afford to offend him? I finally had the chance to sign. After these words, Fong Huiming finally calmed down. His future and the Yu family's regard for him are always more important than mine.
8.
Until she got married, Fong Huiming never caused any trouble. The moment I sat in the Wen family's sedan chair, my heart finally settled down. I know that going to the Wen family is not for enjoying life. I just hope that the eldest son of the Wen family is really a playboy who spends his days eating, drinking, gambling, and whoring outside, so that I can have more free time to do what I want. This marriage was something I had no expectations for. However, when Wen Jiadaling lifted my veil, I couldn't help but be stunned. He is extremely handsome. His eyebrows are like black emerald, his eyes are like stars, his face is as pretty as jade, and he is unique and charming. In addition, having been in the world of pleasure for a long time, there is a unique romanticism in his eyes that seduces people without being noticed. I stared blankly for a moment. It was not until he handed the cup of wine to my lips with a smile that I suddenly came to my senses and blushed. He has not said a word since he entered the room until now. I know he is deaf, but I didn't think much about it. Most of the deaf people cannot learn to speak. He looked at me so tenderly and guided me to the bed with his movements, where I took off my clothes and performed the zhougong ceremony. I couldn't recognize him when he was wearing clothes, but without them, his figure, skin color, and muscle shape were exactly the same. I wanted to verify my guess, so I reached out to touch his back. The person I guessed had a long scar on his back, but he grabbed her head with his backhand and she couldn't move. It wasn't until he moaned in arousal that I had some real assurance. This sound was exactly the same as the spy's when he was aroused. Even the slight tremor at the end of the note was the same. Since I became mute, my sensitivity to sounds has increased a lot. Plus, my sexual habits and the size of that place also match. The eldest son of the When family in front of him is most likely the spy. I didn't hide the suspicion in my eyes and stared at the person on me. Finally, she couldn't pretend anymore and laughed. It seems you are quite smart. It's been less than half an hour, and you have already guessed it. I wanted to tease you a little longer, but you're boring, really boring. I never imagined that the assassin spy under Prince Yong would actually be the dissolute and romantic eldest son of the Wen family, Wenze. He knew from the beginning that I was the second daughter of the Jiang family, and he also knew that I would marry him. What he said in Sanqing Temple was completely slander against me. Just kidding. Playing with me in the palm of your hand. For a moment, I was angry and annoyed. But the problem was that he was really a subordinate of Prince Yong. I had seen him kill people without blinking an eye, so I was afraid and didn't dare to get angry with him. So he turned his head away and stopped looking at him. Are you upset? Wenze leaned over and placed delicate kisses on my neck, as if trying to coax me. I work for Prince Yong, and I have never hidden this from you. I had my reasons for what happened at Sanqing Temple. Wenze was patient enough to explain it to me. I knew this was the step he gave me, so I stopped being so arrogant and turned around to listen to him. I did hear about the Jiang family's replacement of their daughter, so I went to Sanqing Temple to test you. If you hadn't agreed to me that time, you would have married into the Wen family and lived peacefully as a concubine. I wouldn't have told you about my other identity. But you agreed, which means you have changed. The person who knows my identity and is willing to fight alongside me must be a madman who is willing to risk everything like me. Instead of the indecisive little girl who is always hesitant and willing to give up her parents' hatred for a man. Speaking of this, Wenze's eyes were full of smiles, but with a hint of sarcasm. I understood what he meant. He was referring to me. When he first approached me for cooperation, I rejected him because I believed Fong Huaiming could avenge me. In his eyes, I am not such an ungrateful person who abandons the hatred of my mother's family for my own love. He didn't dare to trust me with his back. If it were me, I wouldn't dare either. So he wanted to test me, and luckily I passed.
But
I looked at the person in front of me who spoke fluently, but I was still full of doubts. Doesn't everyone say that the eldest son of the Wen family is deaf? I went to the Flower Corner building before and saw Wenze talking to the mothers and girls in the building, and now he is talking to me, and there is nothing wrong with it. I raised my doubts. He said, I can't hear any sound now, but I'm not deaf since childhood. I injured my ear more than 10 years ago, so I can speak now. After I became deaf, I learned lip reading. I can understand what others are saying by looking at their lips, and it is not difficult to have a conversation. He paused, his eyes showing some sadness. That's why I chose you. I really think we are alike. My father was also pushed out by the second and third branches of the Wen family in the corruption case 18 years ago. They said he was colluding with your grandfather, so he was exiled thousands of miles away and died on the road. My mother fell ill because of this and died within 2 years. Later, my cousins framed me for theft. Since I had no parents to support me, they pinned me down and slapped me dozens of times until my face bled. My ears are just so deaf. Wenze's tone was light, but it stirred up a huge wave of shock in my heart. It turns out that there is such a person in this world who is so similar to me. I suddenly remembered that before I got married, Zhang Xiaoxiao once came to tease me and said, Sister, you and the eldest son of the Wen family are a perfect match. He is deaf and you are dumb. He is a bastard without parents and you are also a motherless bastard. He loves drinking and visiting prostitutes, but sister, you are also a prostitute. Oh my, this is a match made in heaven. You have to thank my sister for giving you this good marriage. Now it seems that Zhang Xiaoxiao was right. Wenze and I are a perfect match. Apart from what she said, the most compatible thing between Wenze and I is that we share the same hatred. Thinking of this, I groped under the quilt and held his hand. From now on, He and I will walk together on the dark and thorny road.
9.
The Jiang family is a sea of suffering, and the Wen family is a den of tigers and wolves. The second and third wives are not good people at all. On the first day of my wedding, they wanted to give me a warning. They said they wanted to teach me manners. I had to hold the boiling hot tea in my hands and kneel down to beg the elders to drink it. It's obviously a dilemma. When I was about to compromise, Wen, holding a folding fan, rudely overturned the tea and splashed it onto the ant of the second room. People from the second and third houses don't need to act like elders in front of my husband and me. After my parents passed away, the elders in Wen only recognized Grandpa. Who do you think you are? Wen spoke bluntly, turned around, and pulled me out. But he was surrounded by the servants of the second house. I was startled by this scene and subconsciously grabbed Wen's sleeve tightly. But he seemed to be used to it, and he went back to his room and sat down, crossing his legs. It seems that my uncle and aunt don't like what I just said. Since you like to act like elders in front of me, I will also act like an elder brother in front of my brothers. They often pester me and ask me to take them to the flower corner and the casino. Before Wen could finish his words, his second uncle smashed the cup and told him to get out. No matter whose son it is, they all treasure him and prevent Wen from bringing him to those dirty places, which would really ruin his future. No one would drag their own child down just to make a good-for-nothing prodigal feel uncomfortable. My disaster was escaped so easily. After returning to the house, Wen scolded me angrily. You are too soft-hearted. They bullied you, but you didn't know how to vent your anger. If I wasn't here today, would you let them do whatever they wanted? SAE? This is a vocabulary that has never appeared in my life. Satan would annoy Fong Huiming. Fong Huiming only told me to be patient. He always told me, Qin, just bear with it until I get shot and don't cause any trouble. In the past, Zhang Xiaoxiao bullied me severely. When I fought back occasionally, he blamed me for being impatient and always causing trouble for him. But now, Wen said to me, many of the Wen family members are not easy to deal with. The more you tolerate them, the more they will push their limits. So, you can be tough as you want. What's there to be afraid of about people like us? No matter what trouble you get into, I'll back you up. After saying this, he looked at me and smiled somewhat helplessly. With thin arms and legs, no one can hit him, and he can't talk or curse at anyone. I lowered my head, twirled my handkerchief, and felt very inferior. In fact, I have always been aware of my mediocrity and cowardice, my lack of ability, and the fact that I am a disabled recluse. Even if I want to avenge my mother and overturn the verdict on my grandfather's behalf, I can only pray for a man to help me. Earlier, I was counting on Fong Huiming. Now I rely on Wen. Wen said he chose me to support his back, but what practical things can I do for him? When I was feeling sorry for myself, Wen lifted my chin with a folding fan. Qin, I remember you weren't born dumb. You could speak in the past? I nodded blankly. From now on, as long as I'm by your side, if you feel wronged, just curse. It's okay if you can't make any sound. I can read your lips and I'll curse for you. Wen words sounded like a joke, but they suddenly brought out the tenderness that had been hidden deep in my heart for a long time. After I became mute, no one cared whether I could speak or not, and no one would let a mute woman speak. Even Fong Huiming. And now, there are two eyes in front of me, looking at me with burning eyes. I am deaf. I can't hear. I usually rely on looking at the mouth shape. So in my eyes, you are the same as them. Just open your mouth. You are the same as them. I kept repeating this in my mind, and finally, as if I had mustered up the courage, I cursed him with an almost exaggerated mouth shape. Asshole. Suddenly, Wen smiled and said, Why are all the insults so soft? Follow my example, you coffin man. I was also smiling, and I mimicked whatever he said. I looked at Wen face with a smile and unconsciously uttered two words. Wen. Seeing my lip shape, Wen was stunned for a moment. Then he stretched out his hand to trace my lips, as if he wanted to trace the shape of my lips calling his name into his heart. From now on, whenever you call my name, I will definitely respond to you. At this moment, when Zay's eyes were bright, as if he was making some great oath. I then realized that I used to be like a poor farm girl, eating bran and brown rice every day. Once I came across white flour steamed buns, I thought it was the best food in the world. Little did we know that there are still delicious foods in this world. Fong Huaiming was the white steamed bun I met when I was still young. And Wenza is a real delicacy. It turns out that there are men like him in the world.
10.
The return banquet 3 days later was held at the Jiang family. The eldest lady even sent the post to the county governor and invited many bureaucrats to support Jiang Xiaoxiao. At this return party, when Zay and I were just supporting roles, I sat in the corner and ate and drank unconsciously. But even though we don't pick fights, troubles always come to us. When Zay changed his clothes during the banquet and did not return for a long time, I sent someone to look for him, but I ran into Jiang Xiaoxiao's maid, who came in with tears in her eyes. She said that when Zay was drunk and flirted with her. Hearing this, Jiang Xiaoxiao's face was filled with grief, and she forced me to accept her. As soon as Jiang Xiaoxiao started singing this song, I knew what she was planning. Although she disliked Wen Zay, she did not dislike the Wen family. She stuffed the maidservant in as a concubine, and it would be best if I, the main wife, was squeezed so tightly that there was no room for me to stand. Naturally, she would grab all the benefits. After spending many days with Wen Zay, I understand that he is not really a lustful and dissolute person. It can only be Jiang Xiaoxiao's empty slander. I have always been easy to be manipulated in the Jiang family, so Jiang Xiaoxiao wanted to strike while the iron was hot while Wen Zay was not back. Today is a good day for us sisters to return home. We don't want to make this girl cry and ruin the joy. Sister, just drink this cup of concubine tea, reassure her, and ask her to leave early. If I accept this Hongxia, she will become a spy between Wen Zay and me in the future. There is no guarantee that she will not discover Wen Zay's identity, which would be a disaster. So I put down my bowl and chopsticks, turned around and looked at Hongxia, who was kneeling on the ground. Where did second aunt flirt with you? How frivolous. Did anyone see it? Do you have any evidence? Is your body broken? I was using sign language, and even though I couldn't speak, my tone was already aggressive enough. Hongxia stammered and couldn't explain anything. There are so many girls who try to curry favor with men. Who knows if she saw second aunt drunk and tried to seduce her? I was signing when Wen Zay came back. He only needed a glance to understand it. He sat down with a chuckle. Just now in the locker room, this girl broke in and insisted on serving me and feeding me sobering soup. I accidentally touched the back of her hand. How could the girl from the Jiang family be so precious that she could be taken in just by touching her hand? Father and mother-in-law, you can ask someone to test her. I didn't break her virginity. If she has to leave after serving me once, then the 6 or 7 maids who brought me in, washed my hands, served me food, poured me wine, and fanned me, should all be taken away. Oh, by the way, those who have served my brother-in-law should also be given gifts by my brother-in-law, right? Hearing this, the maids at the table all turned pale. Wen Zay was out of character and started to yell about picking people around the room, even dragging Fong Huaiming along with him. His father did not want him to embarrass himself in front of so many bureaucrats, so he spoke up personally and suggested that Hongxia, the maid who deliberately sought his favor, should be suppressed. Only then did he barely calm Wen Zay's commotion. When we sat down, Wen Zay leaned over to my ear and whispered in my ear, "You did a good job. We should be tough like this and not be a soft persimmon that can be bullied by others. No matter what, you can't beat me for being so absurd. I'll cover for you." The heat made my ears itchy, and I couldn't help laughing and turning away from him. But when he turned around, he saw Fong Huaiming sitting at the opposite table. His face was gloomy and chilling. After just a moment of looking at each other, I had a bad feeling in my heart. Sure enough, when his father took Wen Zay to the inner room to talk, Fong Huaiming took advantage of the fact that the guests had left and there were few people around, covered my mouth and dragged me behind the rockery. He pressed me against the rockery, my back ached, but I couldn't get away. He even held my hands, so I didn't even have the chance to sign. Jiang Qinqin, you've only been married to that bastard from the Wen family for a few days and you've changed? What do you look like now? Aggressive and hateful. You even learned to embarrass your servants and help the emperor to commit atrocities. Where is your gentle and quiet self again? Fong Huaiming's eyes were red and his face was full of pain. This look seemed to be for me, but it made me feel sick. I couldn't stop struggling, but Fong Huaiming held me tighter and tighter. Want to escape? You want to go find that bastard from the Wen family? What kind of magic potion did he feed you? Jiang Qinqin, we've been childhood sweethearts for 10 years, and you've never smiled at me like that, and you've never looked at me the same way you look at him. I had convinced myself that you had to marry him. Now it seems that I was wrong. You must be happy with him, right? A playboy like him is naturally very good at serving girls. You like him very much, right? Jiang Qinqin, you're just a slutty whore. Fong Huaiming's curses became more and more unpleasant, and the movements of his hands became increasingly dishonest. Seeing Fong Huaiming was about to cross the line, I finally found an opportunity and kicked over the potted plants on the rockery. The potted plant fell from the rockery, making a loud noise. The maids and servants came over after hearing the noise, and Fong Huaiming let me go in dismay. But before he left, his eyes were like a venomous snake, and he whispered threateningly, Jiang Qinqin, sooner or later I will snatch you back. When I pass the imperial examination, I will be an official, and that bastard from the Wen family will be a commoner. Do you think he can compete with me? 11. I told Wenze all the harsh words Fong Huaiming said. He just smiled disdainfully and said, Stop being a clown.
I'll assign some more people to you.
You can take them with you when you go out. Don't let him bully you anymore. I don't have time to deal with him now. The capital is about to fall into chaos. Prince Yong has told me to seize power in the Wen family as soon as possible. News came from the capital that the old emperor was ill again. The current crown prince has been in this position for 40 years and is already impatient to ascend to the throne. It is very likely that he will force his way out of the palace and launch a rebellion. Whether Prince Yong can overtake others depends on this opportunity. Now, at the critical period for the crown prince to seize the throne, an order was issued to the subordinate merchant families to increase their tribute of food, money, and weapons, and the Jiang and Wen families were among them. The two families had almost emptied out half of their assets, but the prince still felt it was not enough, so he sent provincial governors and county magistrates to put pressure on them every few days. The two family heads were miserable. It was at this time that Wenze stepped forward and proposed a reform plan for the Wen Family Dragoon Bureau. The head of the Wen family, Wenze's grandfather, allocated a small police station in the town for Wenze to experiment with. The small fortress bureau, which originally had a daily revenue of about 20 taels, immediately increased it to 30 taels. In fact, the method is simple. As long as everyone from the shopkeeper to the bodyguard is strictly controlled, the accounts are checked, their daily hidden tricks are sorted out, and the loopholes in the Wen family's various bodyguard departments are plugged. Since the eldest branch lost power, the Wen family fell into the hands of the second and third branches. The management of the entire Wen family's escort agency was full of loopholes. The managers of each branch deceived their superiors and lied to their subordinates, and the financial accounts were in a mess. The head of the Wen family is old and has not been in charge of affairs for a long time. Now, the prince suddenly gave the order. He opened the Wen family storehouse and found out that the annual revenue of the Wen family had been declining over the years since the second and third rooms were taken over by the housekeepers. In daily conversations, I always use false accounts to deceive this old man who is almost senile. The Wen family was almost doomed. The head of the Wen family fell ill overnight, beating his chest and stamping his feet, saying that he had entrusted the family business to the wrong person. Wenze has always been known as an unreliable playboy. For many years, he was not even allowed to enter the Wen family's meeting hall. But when things really got out of hand, the people in the second and third rooms only knew how to blame each other, and only Wenze was somewhat reliable. Therefore, at this critical moment, the head of the Wen family gave the order to Wenze, asking him to pry out the money that was used for corruption from the pockets of the bodyguard and the shopkeeper. Wenze was beaming with joy the day he returned with the order to be the family head. He hugged me, his eyes full of enthusiasm and excitement for the upcoming battle. Qin, it's finally time for you to take action. Now that Wenze has gained the power of the Wen family, I will also take action against the Jiang family. I started going back to my parents' home more frequently. If Wenze has any good ideas, I will go home and tell my father about them and let him follow his method to fill the gap in the Jiang family. Whenever my father inspected the shipyard, I accompanied him. Because of my concern for my mother's family and Wenze's current monopoly on power, my father is much closer to me than before. This made Jiang Qinqin's teeth itch with hatred. It was obvious that when she was at home, she was the legitimate daughter and the apple of her father's eye. But a married woman should obey her husband. My husband is the current leader of the Wen family. Her husband was still a humble scholar, and even if he wanted to take the imperial examination to become an official, the examination would not be held until 3 years later. The Jiang family shopkeeper and servants are also used to treating people differently based on their social status. Every time I go back to my parents' home, they are always more attentive to me than to Jiang Xiaoxiao and Fang Huaiming. When Jiang Xiaoxiao and I went to see my father outside the study, but he only saw me and not her. I understand that the plot for my part has already been laid out. Always ready to go. 12. The struggle for imperial power is about to break out. The whole Qi dynasty was filled with the sound of cranes crying. Even in Yuanan County, Jizhou, 300 miles away from the capital, everyone felt insecure. Because the prince began to secretly dispatch troops from various states and counties to the capital. In order to conceal their tracks, the soldiers boarded the Jiang family's fleet, disguised as the Wen family's bodyguards, and took the water route to Beijing. With just one word from the prince, the Jiang and Wen families were forced to be involved in this conspiracy of regicide and usurpation of the throne. To ensure that everything went smoothly, my father and Wenze went to Beijing with the fleet. And I also begged my father to let me catch up with the fleet. When he was about to enter the capital, Wenze received news that the prince's troops and Prince Yong were fighting fiercely in the palace. Order us to speed up the process and support the prince. I stood beside Wenze as a large number of ships were about to dock. He spoke up for me. I just received news from the crown prince that the people on the ship are rebels under Prince Yong's command. Jiang family boatmen and Wen family armored officers listen to my orders, kill the rebels, and sink the cruise ship. The Jiang family's boatmen and sailors all looked hesitant, because my father was on the ship, and it was not convincing for me to issue the order without him showing up. During this time, I stayed with my father every day, just waiting for this day. I spent nearly half a year preparing the situation and finally convinced all the shopkeepers, shipmasters, and boatmen of the Jiang family that I was the daughter my father valued and trusted the most. It also made my father let down all his guard against me. But the moment I received the order to take action, I drugged my father with a cup of tea and stole his household order. At this moment, I took out the Jiang family's patriarch's order and held it high above my head. After talking to each other, the Jiang family's captains and sailors obeyed the order and started the engine to release water and sink the ship. The Jiang family's boat master and the Wen family's air drill master both make a living on the rivers, and none of them can't swim. Most of these soldiers who were transferred from afar were land troops, and more than half of them were wiped out in an instant. Wenze and I also fell into the water as the boat sank. Even in the water, there is a flash of swords and shadows, which is no less than the battle on land. That day, I saw with my own eyes that the entire Jing River was dyed red with blood. It's like purgatory on earth. But Wenze was always by my side protecting me. Just seeing his face made me feel at ease. Because Wenze and I defected in the battlefield, the prince was outnumbered and suffered a crushing defeat. The old emperor was grateful for Prince Yong's service in protecting the emperor and made him the crown prince. 7 days later, the old emperor passed away, and Prince Yong succeeded to the throne as the new emperor. Before Wenze and I returned to Yuanan County, we also got the reward we wanted. Under the pretext of investigating the rebellious prince, the new emperor sent people to investigate the prince's followers. Among them are the Jiang and Wen families and the corruption case in Jizhou 18 years ago. 13. The Jiang and Wen families, and even the Yuanan County and Lizhou government offices, were all deeply connected with the former crown prince. The former crown prince had been on the throne for 40 years and had been scrambling for money. It is not an exaggeration to call him the former prince's lackey. Due to the long duration, huge amount of money involved, and wide-ranging implications, the imperial eunuchs sent by the emperor to investigate the case took a whole year to complete. Father, uncles from the second and third branches of the Wen family, former governor of Yuanan County, former governor of Jizhou, these important figures were imprisoned for a whole year each. Finally, when the final verdict and sentencing were about to be made, the emperor recalled the imperial envoy in charge of the case and replaced him with a new one. I never imagined that this person would be Fang Huaiming. He wore a scarlet official uniform and, accompanied by soldiers, he opened the door of the Wen family's home to arrest Wenze. Grandpa passed away half a year ago, and Wenze naturally became the new head of the Wen family. Fang Huaiming said that the Wen family had been colluding with the rebellious prince for many years, so there was no way he knew that Wenze was not involved. As the head of the Wen family, he must bring Wenze back to the government office and torture him severely. Seeing that Wenze had been escorted by soldiers, I could not care less and stopped at the gate. Fang Huaiming, you are just a humble official, without any official title. How dare you pretend to be an official appointed by the imperial court? Seeing my sign language, Fang Huaiming lowered his head and smiled, his tone full of pride. Your Majesty ascended the throne and opened up the imperial examinations. I didn't have to wait for the imperial examinations 3 years later. I went to Beijing to take the exams last year, and now I am a Jinshi of the new dynasty. I am a minister appointed by His Majesty himself, and I have the imperial sword. You say I am pretending. As he spoke, Fang Huaiming took 2 steps forward, leaned over, and whispered in my ear. I've said before, when I pass the imperial examination, I'll be an official, and this idiot is a commoner. He can't defeat me. You, Jiang Qinqin, can only be in my pocket. After I have dealt with this mess of the Wen family, I will come back to settle the score for your betrayal. Having said that, Fang Huaiming took Wenze away with his men, without even looking back. Wenze was taken away, and I was suddenly at a loss. Because I know that Fang Huaiming will definitely find a way to sentence Wenze to death. Just as I was standing in the yard with my mind in a daze, Wenze's personal servant found me. Said Wenze left something for me. It was a divorce letter. Wenze has already signed and put his fingerprints on it. Next to his name, my name and fingerprints were also clearly printed on it. The time was 1 month ago. In addition to this, there is another letter. Qinqin, the closer we get to the critical moment, the more uneasy I feel. Overturning the verdicts of those years may not be as easy as we imagine, and I may not be able to escape unscathed. I was afraid something might go wrong, so I got you drunk on your birthday and signed this divorce agreement without your knowledge. When you see this letter, I will probably have met with an accident. But don't be afraid, I have prepared enough money, land, shops, and slaves for you, and none of these belong to the Wen family. You and I have divorced. Even if the Wen family is confiscated and the property is ransacked one day, you'll be safe. On your birthday, you made a wish that you would live in peace and comfort for the rest of your life. You and I are husband and wife. I will do my best to fulfill your wish so that our 2 years of marriage will not be in vain. Attached to the letter was a box full of land deeds and banknotes. I tightly grasped the letter left by Wenze and wrinkled the edges. Big tears fell on the letter, blurring the words. At this moment, the heart-wrenching pain that my mother felt when she passed away came back to me again. Feeling the pain in my heart, I realized that I had fallen in love with him unknowingly over the past 2 years. During the 2 years I was with Wenze, he listened to what I said and said that I was just like everyone else. Teach me to calculate, teach me to scatter. Also accompany me as housekeeper and be my support. We have experienced life and death together. We also cried together when we heard the good news of the reinvestigation of the case. We even lived a simple and sweet life as husband and wife after the new emperor ascended the throne. This man has long been integrated into my bones and blood and has become an indispensable part of my life. The free and peaceful days I want must be warm and gentle days. Otherwise, I'd rather not have it. When I was young, I was unable to save my mother. But now I must save Wenze. 14. I found the Yuanan County Government Office. Fong Huiming is now staying there temporarily while working on a case. Seeing me coming, Fong Huiming was not surprised. He just raised his head slightly from the desk, without saying a word, and waited for me to bow to him first. I want to see Wenze. Before I came to see Fong Huiming again, I had already used up all my connections just to meet Wenze, but I couldn't. No matter how much favors those officials have received from the Jiang and Wen families in the past, they dare not offend the officials appointed by the emperor for my sake. I can only come to Fong Huiming.
Sure.
Fong Huiming agreed readily, but I know he must have conditions. As expected, the first thing he said was something disgusting. Beg me to take you as my concubine. At first, I tried my best to coax you, said all the nice things, and told you how I had no choice, but you still refused to marry me. But he turned around and got into a hot fight with that bastard from the Wen family. Now, I just want you to know that being his wife is worse than being my concubine. Every word was sarcastic, like a slap in the face. I didn't feel humiliated. I knelt down neatly and used sign language to Fong Huiming. As long as you let me see Wenze once, I will be your slave, not to mention your concubine. Fong Huiming didn't show the relief I imagined, but instead his face darkened. You'd go this far for him? You care about him that much? Fong Huiming held my chin tightly and stared at me for a long time before slapping my face away fiercely. Go see him. I hope you can still be obsessed with him after seeing him like this. Hearing this, a bad feeling spread in my heart. The place where I met Wenze was in a dark secret room. The smell of blood mixed with the smell of decay was so pungent that it made people nauseous. With the help of the dim candlelight in the officer's hand, I saw Wenze was hanging with his wrists tied in the center of the secret room, with his upper body naked and not a single piece of healthy skin on his body. Those scars, either from whipping or branding. In short, he was tortured beyond recognition. One look and I couldn't help but burst into tears. He was clearly such a handsome man in the past. The official was a friend of the Jiang and Wen families in the past. He said with some pity, "It has been 5 days since I came in. I have been tortured and have not eaten a grain of rice. I secretly replaced the water with rice syrup and added some ginseng soup to help me survive for a while longer." I nodded and thanked him. Even such a trivial thing could save Wenze's life. Can I go in and see him? I knelt down towards the officer and used sign language. Hurry up, please. The officer picked me up and said in embarrassment, "It's not that I don't want to do this, it's just that I don't have the key." The key must be in Fong Huiming's hands. I looked at Wenze through the small iron window, tears streaming down my face. At this moment, Wenze in the secret room seemed to move. He seemed to raise his head slightly and opened his eyes. Wenze! Wenze! I knocked on the door hard, opened my mouth as wide as possible, and moved my lips. But Wenze in the secret room clearly turned his face towards him, but his eyes were not focused. Didn't give me any response. A sigh came from my side. The officer said, "For the past few days, Master Wen has been unable to see the light. This is also a form of punishment. Now, even though he has suddenly seen the light, he can no longer see." Can't see? I immediately turned around and grabbed the officer's sleeve, anxiously trying to say something, but my throat was tightly held and I couldn't make a sound. Despair instantly overwhelmed me. Wenze is already deaf and now he can't see, so I can't enter this secret room. An iron gate and a few fences seem to be a natural barrier between Wenze and me. It's so close yet it can't be crossed. Chin chin. A very faint moan came from the secret room. I turned around in joy, leaned on the small iron window, and frantically lip-synced and signed. "I'm here. Can you see it? Wenze, I'm here." But Wen Zhe still had his eyes unfocused, mumbling blankly. Qin Qin, I dreamed of you again. It was great. Seeing you made the pain less severe. At this moment, I realized that Wen Zhe still couldn't see me. The immense sorrow seemed to fill my body, and when I couldn't bear it anymore, it instantly broke through my tightly held throat and turned into a mouthful of blood, gushing out. Immediately, my throat seemed to be unblocked, and tears mixed with sorrow burst out. Wen Zhe, this is not a dream. I am right in front of you. 10 years later, I spoke out again. Ever since my mother passed away, I have been mute. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't utter a word in the past 10 years. Now I can speak. But the person I most wanted to hear couldn't hear me. Wen Zhe, you promised me that you would respond whenever I called you. Now that I have shouted, why don't you respond to me? Wen Zhe, answer me. Look at me. I can talk. But no matter how hard I shouted, Wen Zhe in the secret room didn't react at all. Finally, I could only leave a hoarse plea and promise. Wen Zhe, I will definitely save you. You must wait for me. 15. As soon as I came out of prison, I saw Fong Huaiming waiting for me outside. He seemed confident. I've seen that bastard's half-human appearance, but you weren't scared to the point of being unable to walk. I didn't bother to pay attention to him and just walked past him. But he pulled her into his arms and said, you said that as long as I saw him once, I would be willing to be his slave. Are you going to turn your back on me now? I raised my eyebrows, my eyes full of defiance and disdain, and signed. So what? Jiang Qinqin, you'll pay the price for playing tricks on me. Fong Huaiming's face darkened, and he was obviously angry and wanted to use force on me. But Fong Huaiming is such a villain. How could I not be on guard before meeting him? I took out the letter of appointment written by the governor of Yangzhou. He hired me to build a Wanfu ship as a tribute from Jizhou, to be presented to His Majesty during the Wanshou festival. As early as the day I saw Wen Zhe's letter of farewell, I had already set out for the Fuzhou government office. I know that the governor of Hezhou is worried about the tribute for the Wanshou festival. As a result of the corruption case that happened many years ago, the two largest merchant families in Hezhou, the Jiang family and the Wen family, fell into decline overnight. That's why they posted notices in front of the government office, looking for skilled craftsmen to create tributes with Hezhou characteristics. But for a long time no one dared to respond. I personally took down the notice and also accepted the job on behalf of the Jiang family. I know that the only one who can save Wen Zhe at this time is the emperor. When the emperor was still Prince Yong, Wen Zhe worked for him. In Yuanan County and Jizhou, he helped him deal with many shameful and dirty matters, and his hands were stained with filth and blood. Later, when fighting for power with the crown prince, it was Wen Zhe who risked his life to intercept dozens of ships of elite troops that were coming to aid the crown prince. To be frank, Wen Zhe has the merit of following the dragon. With such a relationship, it is not impossible to ask the emperor to save Wen Zhe's life. I need an opportunity to meet His Majesty, and offering sacrifices during the longevity festival is the best opportunity. The tribute details and my name have already been reported to the capital. If you want to detain me by force now, you have to ask the governor whether he agrees. I use sign language and turn my head to see a group of soldiers sent by the governor waiting outside. Fong Huaiming stared at me, and after weighing the pros and cons, he finally let go. The current governor of Jizhou was sent by the emperor himself from the central government to replace the former governor after an old case was reinvestigated. Fong Huaiming could not afford to offend him. I snorted coldly and walked out. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly thought of Wen Zhe and stopped. Without looking back, I just warned you word by word in my hoarse voice. Fong Huaiming, even if Wen Zhe really committed a crime, you must handle it according to the law. If he died in prison for unknown reasons, I will pursue the matter to the end. I also played a part in helping the new emperor ascend the throne. Just look at my ability to follow the dragon. I hope it won't cost you your life. After saying that, I quickly returned to the Jiang family. There are less than 3 months left until the emperor's birthday. It is not easy to make an elaborate, complex, and magnificent Wanfu ship in such a short time. But the bigger problem is that even though I have the orders from the Jiang and Wen families to be the heads of the families, I cannot give orders to these people to do anything. After the two heads of the families were arrested, many people were thinking about splitting up the family business, quitting their jobs, and running away. I sent people to surround the hundreds of shipmasters and escorts from the Jiang and Wen families who had not been arrested and imprisoned in the shipyard. When I got back, the Jiang family boathouse was already full of complaints. I stepped onto a high place, took out two family orders, and used my broken voice to threaten and lure him. I have accepted the task of presenting tribute on behalf of the Jiang and Wen families for the Wanshou festival. 3 months later, the tribute ships must be brought to the capital. If they fail to do so, the Jiang and Wen families will be guilty of deceiving the emperor, and their entire families will be executed. After he finished speaking, there was constant commotion below. I raised my voice a little more. You all know what the Jiang and Wen families are like now. The former crown prince fell from power, and the Jiang and Wen families were also implicated. At this time, only the two heads of the family were arrested and imprisoned. Who knows if it won't be our turn? At this moment, if we can complete this Wanfu ship, it will be a good deed to atone for our sins. When we go to the capital to pay tribute, I will definitely ask for mercy and a way out for everyone. These words turned the Jiang and Wen families into grasshoppers on a rope. They had no way out and could only fight with all their might, and finally they managed to stabilize the situation. Seeing all the escorts and boatmen working so hard, I clenched my fists. I am no longer the Jiang Qin who only knew how to rely on men. Wenze taught me so much: calculation, strategy, and the madness of taking a gamble. This time, I will use what he taught me to save his life.
16.
3 months later, I went to Beijing on the Wanfu ship as I wished. The emperor was very satisfied with the Wanfu ship, and he immediately expressed his wish to reward me. I knelt down to thank you, bowed my head and said, "Your Majesty, I thank you for your gift, but I am too brave. Can I use the gift as a favor to your Majesty?" As soon as these words were spoken, the governor of Jizhou, who was traveling with me, suddenly panicked and apologized for me. The emperor waved his hands and said it was okay. He also dismissed the attendants and left me alone in the palace. "Are you the little virgin from the Jiang family that Wenze married?" The emperor looked at me with a hint of inquiry and amusement in his eyes. "Why are you able to speak now?" "My muteness is incurable, but that day in prison, when I saw Wenze being beaten to pieces, I was so angry that I spat out blood, and now I can speak a few words," I replied carefully and respectfully, not daring to make the slightest mistake. "I know why you went to so much trouble to come to the capital, to build the Wanfu ship, and to ask for mercy. You want to save Wenze, right?" The emperor's question excited me so much that I forgot the rule of not facing Tianyan directly. I stood up and crawled forward on my knees 2 steps to the emperor. Carefully pulling at the corner of the dragon robe, he begged, "Yes, your Majesty, please spare my husband's life." The corruption case 18 years ago had nothing to do with Wenze. Wenze was only 5 or 6 years old at that time. After growing up, Wenze has been secretly loyal to you and has nothing to do with the former crown prince. The image of Wenze being hung in the secret room always appeared in my mind. As I was talking, tears welled up and dripped onto the upper of the emperor's dragon boots. When I was young, the emperor, who was known for his cruelty, showed some pity when he saw me in such a state. Hesitated, as if there was something he couldn't say. "It's not that I don't want to save him, but I can't save him." The emperor showed some regret on his face. "Wenze is my man. He has been with me since he was 16 or 17 years old. He has been loyal to me for nearly 10 years. He is my retainer and controls the water transportation hub of Jizhou for me. I don't want to lose him as my arm." Only the emperor sighed and told me about his helplessness. In fact, as early as when he succeeded in seizing the throne and became emperor, he secretly summoned Wenze into the palace once. What they discussed was the corruption case 18 years ago and the affairs of the former crown prince's party. The emperor meant that he had just ascended the throne and his foundation was not stable, so the matter should not be brought up again. He also did not want Wenze to waste his life in vain for this. But Wenze was willing to pay with his life and asked the emperor to re-examine the case. On that day, Wenze said in Xianjing Hall, "Re-examining the events of the past is to help your majesty to clear the influence of the former crown prince in Jizhou, to shock the former crown prince's party in the court, and to help your majesty consolidate your foundation. Second, give justice to my parents. Third, to vindicate my wife and her mother's family and comfort her filial piety. For me, this kills 3 birds with 1 stone. If the situation does not go as expected, your majesty can always abandon me to save the overall situation. I only ask your majesty to grant me my lifelong wish. As long as I try this once, I will die without regrets, and my life will not be wasted." Wenze took everyone into consideration, except himself. Completely regaining control over Jizhou and several surrounding states and counties was equally tempting to the new emperor. The king and his ministers decided to reinvestigate the events of that year, attempting to follow the clues and eliminate the remaining forces of the former crown prince one by one. However, his influence during his 40-year reign was underestimated. The former crown prince had already won over the vast majority of the nobles and aristocratic families in the court. Although he has passed away, his younger brother, Prince Xu, who was born of the same mother, is now in his early 20s and in the prime of his life. His mother's family has not been implicated and has not fallen into decline, and his wife's family is also a prominent family with considerable strength. He united with the old aristocratic forces, eyed the new emperor covetously, and exerted constant pressure. After Fong Huaiming passed the imperial examination, he defected to Prince Xu and became a thorn in the emperor's heart. Only by replacing the imperial guards, killing Wenze, and cutting off the emperor's arm could the Qi dynasty's water transport hub, Qizhou, be returned to the hands of Prince Xu. Only then did Prince Xu calm down and sit down to negotiate with the emperor. Otherwise, after hearing this, I realized that this was Wenze's own decision. He had known for a long time that this was likely to be his fate, so he signed the divorce papers early on and kicked me out. The development of the situation has now gone beyond the scope of a county or a state and is related to the change of imperial power in the entire Qi dynasty. If we are not careful, it will be another battle for imperial power with rivers of blood flowing. I knew that there was no turning back, but I still reluctantly asked one last question. Does Wenze have to die? You must die. My last glimmer of hope was shattered. If even the emperor couldn't save Wenze, then no one in the world could save him. I wiped away the last tear, looked up at the emperor, and asked him for a new grace. I want Fong Huaiming to die. 17. In fact, Fong Huaiming was King Xu's man, so it was not easy to kill him. But I managed to convince the emperor with my hoarse voice. I said, "Your Majesty, do you really want to hand over Jizhou to Prince Xu so easily? Kill Fong Huaiming and then give Jizhou to Prince Xu, so that people all over the world will not think that your Majesty is afraid of Prince Xu. Since Prince Xu has taken over Jizhou, he won't care too much about the life and death of a coward like Fong Huaiming." That day, I spoke until my mouth was dry, and the emperor finally nodded. When I returned to Yuanan County half a month later, Fong Huaiming had been stripped of his jinshi status for cheating in the imperial examination and was imprisoned. In fact, as long as the emperor wanted, it would be easy to punish a minister or save his life. It's just that the emperor was unwilling to sacrifice too much to save Wenze. In that case, I'll take my revenge and stay with him. I walked into the prison of Yuanan County. This was not the secret room where Wenze was imprisoned, but just an ordinary cell separated by wooden bars, with more than 10 to 20 people in each cell. I stood in the middle of the prison and looked around. All the prisoners in the surrounding cells were familiar faces. Father, Fong Huaiming, the eldest lady, the uncles from the Wen family, Zhang Xiaoxiao. When they saw me coming, everyone rushed to the fence and asked me if there was any way to rescue them. I said calmly, "During the longevity festival, I presented a boat to His Majesty, and His Majesty was very pleased and granted me a special favor. Hearing this, Fong Huaiming immediately called me affectionately, Qin Qin. Save me. I have studied hard for many years, and you know it best. I can't cheat, and there is no need to cheat. Please use your grace to ask His Majesty to give me a chance to re-examine. I will definitely be able to prove myself. My father also stretched out his hand from the fence and tried to pull my clothes. Good daughter, save daddy. Back then, the Jiang family had no choice but to submit to the late crown prince. Later, you helped His Majesty ascend the throne, so you can be considered a new minister. Can you please spare the lives of our Jiang family? If so, the Jiang family will swear allegiance to His Majesty until death. Several uncles from the Wen family also came out to beg me. They recounted how good Wenze was to me and asked me to save their lives for his sake. I tilted my head in embarrassment, my tone full of regret. Your Majesty has only granted me one favor? Before she finished speaking, Fong Huaiming was the first to speak, with a guilty smile on his face. Qin Qin, you don't know that I divorced Jiang Xiaoxiao a long time ago. Before, I wanted you to be my concubine, but it was just a gamble. As long as you rescue me, you will definitely be my wife. Before I could react, Jiang Xiaoxiao in the corner screamed, rushed over and grabbed Fong Huaiming's hair. So, you divorced me in order to marry this bitch, not to get rid of the relationship and save our Jiang family. Jiang Xiaoxiao felt that she was deceived, and in despair, she punched and kicked her opponent. Fong Huaiming kicked her away and continued to flirt with me. I looked at him coldly, took out a pack of dumb drugs from my pocket, and threw it on the ground. When I was a child, Jiang Xiaoxiao fed me dumb drugs and bullied me in every way. Fong Huaiming immediately understood, crawled over to pick up the medicine bag I dropped, and forced Jiang Xiaoxiao to drink it herself. Seeing Fong Huaiming's expression of loyalty, his father was suddenly at a loss. My remaining eyes glanced at the eldest lady. She loves her daughter dearly, and that's why she is fighting with Jiang Xiaoxiao and Fong Huaiming. With just one look, my father understood. Daddy knows that the First Lady treated you and your mother badly in the past, and Daddy is venting his anger on you. The woman's screams echoed throughout the prison. I walked up to the uncles from the second and third branches of the Wen family and looked down at them. Do you want to live? They nodded hesitantly. In the past, in order to squeeze Wenze out of the Wen family's business, you framed him for theft, slapped him dozens of times, and made him deaf. If you each give your son 20 slaps, I might consider saving your lives. After much hesitation, the two uncles of the Wen family finally took action. The prison was in chaos, with husbands and wives, fathers and sons killing each other just for the chance of survival. It's really a dog-eat-dog show. After they expressed their loyalty, they all looked at me with passionate eyes. I walked past them one by one and pronounced their death sentence. The first one is the two uncles of the Wen family. Wenze has told me everything you did to the eldest wife. You fought for power and profit and caused the eldest wife's family to be destroyed. If Wenze knew that I saved you, he would be very upset. Uncles, if you really feel sorry for Wenze, then go down and apologize to him and your brother and sister-in-law. The second one is my father. Father, you had a part in the false accusation against my grandfather for corruption, didn't you? When you were young, Mother was still the daughter of a governor. You came to ask for her hand in marriage, but you were rejected by my grandfather. You always thought that my grandfather looked down on merchants and held a grudge against us, so you stepped on him hard when he was in trouble. After my mother was demoted to an official prostitute, you bought her back and humiliated her in every way just to see the once high and mighty daughter of the governor linger under your control, right? I know all of this. Even if you are my father, for the sake of my mother and my grandfather, I cannot save your life. The last one is Fong Huaiming's turn. In fact, I asked for a favor for you before I came back. Fong Huaiming was overjoyed. Qin Qin, I knew that you always have me in your heart. I spoke word by word. What I want is for you to die. Your Majesty agreed. Otherwise, why do you think you were arrested for such a ridiculous crime as cheating in the imperial examination? Fong Huaiming's smile froze on his face. I said before, if Wenze dies, you will be buried with him. You used so many extreme tortures on him, don't think you can get away with it easily. Before you die, I will also instruct others to let you experience them one by one. I leaned over to say the last sentence to Fong Huaiming, then turned and left. Behind him, there was unstoppable roaring and cursing. The louder they cursed, the crazier and more arrogant I laughed. I gave them hope of life, but then crushed them one by one with my own hands. How can this not be considered a satisfying revenge? But after walking out of the prison, I couldn't stop crying. I should feel happy. At this moment, I felt sad. If possible, I would rather exchange the life of this beast in prison for Wenze.
But no.
What did Wenze do wrong to deserve to die with these beasts? They should all go to the Yenluo Palace.
18.
A month later, I witnessed with my own eyes the execution of the Jiang and Wen families because they colluded with the late crown prince to plunder the people's wealth. The Jiang family's shipyard and the Wen family's dartboard were all taken over by the imperial court. In name, it was directly under the jurisdiction of the Jizhou government, but in reality, it was controlled by Prince Shu. 10 days later, I heard from the officials that Fong Huaiming could not endure the extreme torture and died in prison. Not long after, Wenze also came to Kaishika to ask for punishment. He was forced to kneel on the execution ground, his face covered in blood, his body covered in scars, and he looked so skinny that he no longer looked like a human. The moment the shovel fell, it was as if the sharp blade cut my heart in two. I cried and tried to jump up, but was held tightly by the soldiers. The official who went with me comforted me. "Don't worry, madam. I will go and collect the body of Master Wen." I had prepared the coffin. After the body was collected, the funeral procession carried it out of the city, beating gongs and drums along the way. And I cried all the way. Generally, prisoners who were beheaded and put on public display were thrown into mass graves to be fed to dogs and were not allowed to be buried. It is a blessing from Your Majesty that Wenze can have officials collect the bodies, use the coffin, and play funeral music. 2 graves had already been prepared in front of the Wen family's ancestral tomb. One is warm and gentle. The other one is mine. After lowering Wenze's coffin into the grave, I thanked the officer and gave him a silver ingot. "Thank you for accompanying me on this journey. This is my reward." I want to talk to him alone again. "Tomorrow morning, please go and collect the body for me." In fact, I didn't want to live a long time ago. When my mother passed away and Jiang Xiaoxiao forced me to drink a mute drug, I wanted to die with the First Lady and her daughter. It was Fong Huaiming who stopped me. I placed my hope of survival on him, but he broke his promise and made me his concubine. In an instant, the only hope in my life was to avenge my mother and overturn the verdict on my grandfather's behalf. Now, the great revenge has been taken, but the person he loved died. Without any attachments in this world, I don't know what the meaning of living is. It would be better to go with Wenze. Besides, I haven't seen my mother for a long time, and I really miss her. So, he drank a cup of poison wine. I shed tears, stroked the coffin, and recalled every detail of the past 2 years between Wenze and me. When did I fall in love with him? When did I decide that he was the love of my life? All the love that I was unable to express in person has now turned into irreparable regret. Wenze will never know again. As I drank cup after cup, I gradually became unconscious and collapsed in front of Wenze's tomb. "Wenze, wait for me. I will come to find you." When I opened my eyes again, I saw Wenze. He closed his eyes. The golden morning light cast a halo on his face. Although his cheeks were thin and his lips were pale, he still looked a bit like the nobleman he used to be. I was stunned, my head was dizzy, and I didn't know whether I went to heaven or hell. I reached out and touched his eyebrows. The warm touch was so real that my nose instantly felt sore. Wenze opened his eyes slowly, and the first thing he saw was me crying. "It's my fault. I made it difficult to hide this from you." He pulled me into his arms, and the warm embrace made me realize that this was not a dream.
Wenze is alive.
He's still alive. I cried so hard that I was out of breath, and all the words of blame and hatred for him were blocked by my sobs. I was speechless, so I punched him in the chest in anger. Wen's face turned pale in an instant. I was also shocked and quickly undressed him, only to find that his body was covered with scars, many of which had not yet healed. "It's okay, don't look at it, it's scary." Wen smiled and picked up his clothes. Then he apologized to me with a serious face. "I didn't mean to hide it from you. When I first entered the prison, I really didn't think I could survive. I have long been prepared to die because I know that I am part of His Majesty's plan to eliminate dissidents. This is why Wen must die." The Emperor also told me clearly. In the following drama and situation, the Emperor implicated Wen and me as well. He needed me to collect the body of Wen, needed me to cry in the streets, and needed to use this method to let everyone in the world know that in order to secure his position, the Emperor would even abandon his subordinates who had been loyal to him for many years. The Emperor is such a cowardly and mediocre ruler. Only if you deceive me can I deceive the people of the world and King Shu. Only after I die will Prince Shu and his family members and ministers think that your Majesty is easy to control, and will they relax their vigilance and reveal their flaws. Fortunately, His Majesty still remembered my loyalty to him for many years and kept me here without telling anyone. Fortunately, after I heard the news, I bribed the officials in advance and replaced your poison wine. Otherwise, we would have been separated forever. Wen held me tightly in his arms, his eyes full of relief at having regained what he had lost. And so do I. It was a long time before I realized we were in a carriage. As soon as I saw Wen, it seemed like there was no room for anything else in my heart and eyes. The horses' hooves tick, but I wonder where they're taking us. Wen and Jiang Qinqin are already dead. We can't stay in Juzhou anymore. Your Majesty has created a new household registration for us in Weizhou. We're going there now. There is also your mother's tablet. I went to Sanqing Temple to get it and brought it with me." Wen chuckled, his eyes sparkling with smile, which made my eyes red again. "Weizhou, that's my maternal grandfather's hometown. Wen is going to take my mother and me home." 19. Half a year later, my grandfather's corruption case was rehabilitated. My uncles, who had been exiled to the border for many years, could finally return to Weizhou. My uncle said in the letter that he missed the perch from Weizhou the most. In order to welcome them, Wen and I went down to the river to fish. While fishing, I happened to meet my uncles returning by boat. I immediately cast out my fishing net and ran towards them. My uncles, aunts, and cousins were all crying with joy and babbling. After a while, my cousin noticed that I hadn't spoken for a long time and said hesitantly, "Didn't you say that your muteness has been cured?" I smiled and shook my head, using sign language to say, "I was in a hurry that day, so I was able to speak. But every time I spoke a word, my throat felt like it was swallowing a razor blade. I held on for several months, and my voice was completely destroyed." Upon hearing this, my uncles and aunts all looked distressed and couldn't stop saying, "What a pity." But I don't think it's a pity, because Wen has already heard my voice. When we first met, I called him by his name. He reached out and stroked my throat, feeling the vibration. Then I lost my voice, which was worse than ever, and could not speak at all. I'm not too sad. I have long been accustomed to not being able to speak and to using sign language. Moreover, whether I can speak or not, I am the same in Wen eyes.
So, it's not a pity.
One of us is deaf and the other is dumb, but we are still a good match. Thinking of this, I turned around and looked at Wen, who was standing in the water with his hands on his hips, angry because he couldn't catch any fish, and I couldn't help but smile. The rivers are silent, but the leaping of fish makes sound. I am silent, but my love is audible.